welcome back to another episode of Space for Life. Today's episode is one that I have thought about for a long time, that I've wanted to find some way to create a really meaningful discussion. I think in some ways today's podcast has the potential to be one of the most important podcasts that I've done over these years that I've been doing Space for Life, because the topic that we're going to talk about has to do with how we live well or how we do not live well virtually every day of our life. I think it's one of the most substantive topics that I can't think of having necessarily directly addressed in all of these episodes of Space for Life. As such, I brought in a good friend, Lisa Ould, who is an Executive Director of Barnabas Center, to bring some real wisdom to today's topic, which is about emotional stability, about how we individually handle our emotions for good and for bad in our lives. And I thought about kind of a title for this particular episode. And I think if I were to put a title to it, I would title it Taming the Stallion. And the idea behind it is that our emotions, in my mind, work almost like a stallion. That stallion has tremendous strengths, tremendous possibility to offer us, and yet also can be very destructive and out of control. So Lisa brings a long time of experience of helping people address their emotional stability. We'll talk about all sorts of words around this. So I am very excited about this episode. It is a challenging episode. It's one in which, as we get into it, I'm going to, I guess, confess here where I see myself on this emotional spectrum. And you can perhaps kind of counsel me through some of my issues, which are many. So thank you, Lisa, for being here. I think this is going to be a phenomenal conversation.
Well, thanks for having me, Tommy. And I was kind of chuckling to myself, thinking about it, that as soon as you name emotions, I think we all begin to feel something. So I think even as you name that, probably the listeners are having different emotional reactions to the fact that we're talking about emotions. And then for you to say this is such a big episode, I begin to be aware of like, oh, wow, I'm feeling a lot. To me, it's just an example that our emotions are everywhere. It's part of how we're made, but I love your image of the stallion, because there's such dignity and beauty in a stallion. There is such dignity and beauty in our emotions, but we don't always use them in productive ways. So hopefully we can all grow through the conversation today.
Well, it's true. There is such kind of dignity and beauty in a stallion, and yet I think, honestly, a lot of people don't feel that way about emotions. Right. They feel like they are almost demons kind of getting at us. And so it then becomes, how do I deal with this really negative force that it just brings all of this negativity into my life? So I do think actually the proper kind of posturing of this is this idea of a stallion, but a stallion that somehow needs some
taming.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that needs good.
All right. Well, we're gonna dive into this, and I love that you talk about what was your emotional response to the fact that we're going to talk about emotions, because some people might be kind of tempted to just turn off the episode. I'm not into that.
Yes.
I don't do the emotion. Right?
Yes.
And then some people feel like, well, I'm getting ready to be judged in a huge way. So this is really good. You have so much to share, because we've already talked a little bit about it before the episode. But perhaps we could begin by trying to, in some way, define what are we talking about when we talk about an emotion.
Well, I happened to bring a little visual aid for us today. And I think Tommy said he can put it in show notes. But when we're talking about an emotion, I don't know how many are on here. You think maybe like 50 or so. But we're talking about that internal response to life and to circumstances. And so we all have them. And on the page that Tommy and I are looking at, the center of it is happy, sadness, anger, fearful, disgust, surprise. And then it just sort of goes out from there. And this is a tool we've begun to use in the counseling office because just because someone might be what we would see as expressing an emotion doesn't necessarily mean that we ourselves know what emotion that we're experiencing.
That's really helpful because when we're talking about this to begin with, the first thing I kind of communicated to you as well. So here are a few emotions that I'm thinking about, and I probably got about 6 out.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I've kind of expressed the range of emotions, and yet this wheel expresses such an additional level of nuance that is helpful. So perhaps just read a few so that instead of thinking just happy, sad, fearful, what are some of the ones that...
Overwhelmed, inadequate, resentful, annoyed, empty, distressed, excited, hopeful, peaceful, dismayed, shocked, perplexed. So that kind of goes around sort of the outer rim that gives you a little more feel of the more nuanced emotions that we can be experiencing in life.
You know, what's interesting, I didn't even think about this earlier, but when I framed emotions to you before when we were talking about this, every single example that I laid out for you was a negative emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't even, in a sense, cross my mind things like excited, exuberant, encouraged, which is a feeling.
Yes.
It didn't even strike me the negative bias that I was expressing when I was beginning this discussion. And yet there are so many positive emotions, and they're as important as the negative ones. That's really helpful. That's helpful for me. I'm already getting counseling.
This is great. Well, and one thing we talked about earlier is being in touch with the emotions. If you're not in touch with them on one end of the scale, you might be missing sort of the other end of the scale as well. And so we want to invite people to be aware, as you're saying, of the breadth so that you're not missing on either end.
Yes, and I think that's particularly helpful for the person whose kind of initial reaction to being emotional is, I don't really see what good that does for me. And what they're expressing, and I've felt this many times personally, is that I don't see how letting that emotion out is productive for me moving forward in any sense. And at some level, what you're expressing is, okay, I can understand how you might feel that, but what is the cost of not being in touch with or expressing emotions when it comes to perhaps positive?
Right. Well, and tell me, I wonder if it's worth naming. There is the experience of a feeling, and then there's an expression of it. And they're actually two different things. And I think one part we want to talk about is when feelings can get us to a place that we're expressing them that feels challenging for people that are around someone, or maybe it seems like they're getting them in trouble. But our goal is not to get people necessarily to express or unexpress as the primary goal. Like the primary, I would hope people can take away from this conversation is that you're in touch with what you're actually feeling. So for those that say, I don't feel a lot, I would just say, I just wonder if you're in touch with what you are feeling. I'm not trying to get you to feel more, but you may be in denial because life circumstances, I believe, evoke responses of fear or sadness or anger because life is complex. Like life comes at us with things that bring pain and sorrow, and life comes at us at things that bring joy. Does that make sense? There literally are circumstances that connect us with that type of response.
And what I hear you saying is that as human beings, we cannot help but have feelings or emotional responses. Whether we choose to, or how we choose to express those is a second level.
Yes.
And then, as we were talking about before, then the choices we make relative to those feelings is almost a third level.
Yes.
But the feelings themselves are inevitable.
Yes. I would say it's part of how we're made in the image of God. If you were to look in the Bible, you would see from Jesus himself a variety of these emotions. If we were to take the time to look at that, we would see Jesus celebrating. We would see Jesus angry. We would see Jesus sad that he responded to life circumstances. And we as humans made in his image also have those types of responses to life.
Yeah, it's a mind-boggling thought, because if we begin with, as I do as a person of Christian faith, begin with the belief that Jesus is God in the flesh, then what we're acknowledging is that God is angry, God is excited, that God weeps and is sad, that God laughs, that God celebrates.
Yeah.
This range of emotions is also attributable to God. And as you say, we are in his image. So that, again, perhaps kind of puts a little bit of cap on me and people like me that can tend to go in the direction of saying, I don't really see any good that emotions are doing.
Right. So that's a belief that you have. And so our beliefs do inform how we live. And so, taking a moment to think about, where do my beliefs about feelings come from? Because typically we have church environments or we have home environments that either consciously or unconsciously taught us messages about, sometimes it's the way men react or women, what's acceptable, or what's acceptable in the way of emotion, that we are maybe choosing to operate in a certain way that's out of that belief system.
So a good place at some level for people to begin in processing everything we're talking about is simply reflecting for a moment on what are my beliefs about emotions. And I love what you said before we started recording, that you saw this discussion as so integral and related to the topic of this podcast of creating space for life, because it's in space that we have some of these considerations. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So let me take it kind of to another place. And I think we've been kind of, beginning to get there. If a person were a clean slate, in a sense, related to emotions, in other words, they weren't they weren't wired to be, for lack of a better way of saying it, overly emotionally expressive or overly emotionally repressive, if we were to use
Yes, yeah.
that term. And it was a blank slate. How would you communicate a proper place or role for emotions to play in a person's life? It's an easy one.
Oh, like a hard one. Well, I think maybe the way that you're asking is like, what is the healthy space to be an emotional person and how we're operating in the world?
Yeah.
And one of the things, there's some terms that we use in the counseling world, and one of them is staying within your window of tolerance. And what that means is that emotionally you're in a space that you're able to rationally and in a healthy way engage with your work and your relationships. That you might be feeling sad or you might be feeling joy, but those things are held in a way that you're still functioning in your life. And so the contrast would be if you're outside of your window of tolerance, what they call it is hypoarousal or hypo or hyper arousal, which means that you're feeling so much on the hypo side that you're low in function. So you're more on the depressed side. You're not able to make decisions. You're not going to work. You're stuck on the couch. Like your emotions are shutting down your ability to function. On the hyper side, there's so much energy that's more in the way of anger. That's more in the way of like energies where you're like pushing against the world. You're creating a lot of conflict in your life that you're not able to keep rationally engaged in your relationships. And so part of the work that we do in the counseling is trying to increase people's window of tolerance so that you're growing in your ability to tolerate the sadness or tolerate the anger or tolerate the stronger emotions, but still stay in a functional way in your relationships and in your work and in your life.
So, yeah, so would an example of that be, let's say this certainly plays out in marriages many times where someone becomes very angry at their spouse.
Uh-huh.
The question then is, okay, I'm feeling this anger.
Yes.
How am I going to express it and what am I going to choose?
Yes.
So the person, in a sense, who feels that anger and then vents, takes it out with great force on their spouse, is a person that you're saying is operating outside of that window of tolerance in that hyper mode.
Yes.
And while the feeling might be legitimate, it's outside of that proper boundary and use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it may be that spouse has done something that is deeply offensive.
That's wordy.
Hurtful.
Right.
Has made you feel betrayed. And that those things may all be true. But if they've now tapped into your emotional life, that your anger is now harming them, we've lost the window of tolerance. And so that's where we want to grow our ability to know when we need to step out of a conversation, we need to step out of something. And do you need to go walk around the block? Do you need to, is there some way that you need to help get yourself back into a regulated state?
Right. So the kind of the second piece of the title that I was thinking of with this Taming the Stallion is learning emotional stability. So what you're saying is it's not trying to not feel something. It's learning how can we utilize these emotions to bring health and wellness to our relationships and to how we live our lives. And a big tool of that is learning with the emotions that perhaps are dominant for us individually. How can we keep those within a window of time.
Yeah, right. And so that's why it's really important to know where you are. If you don't know where you are in your emotion, then you can't make a choice to care for yourself in that space so that you're not then causing damage in other relationships because of where you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So where I am then leads me to be able to make a choice. So I was talking earlier about being with a friend this week who was saying we were actually at the gym together, and she was saying how she's learning if she makes a choice to go to the gym before she sits on the couch, it actually takes her to a place, a more emotionally healthy place, which I think we all can access, right? That there's a sense of movement and engagement. If you're someone that's on the more depressed side of things, that movement takes your body into a more active place, which is where you want to move if you're on the hypo side. You know, if you're on the hyper side, you might need to go to a yoga class. There's a sense of, I need to be in a calm environment. I need to be connected to my body, and I need something that helps me sort of to bring down the sense of escalation. So our choices of what we do with our body related to emotion really matters.
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I'm trying to think of this within the scheme of other things that I talked about within episodes of Space for Life. And in a sense, what you're saying is that once we can become aware of what we're feeling and we can name it well, then perhaps we can frame habits or practices that can help us, manage those emotions?
Yeah, I would say choice, and I would say the choices. Yeah, I mean, what I see is the three working together: the beliefs, the emotions, and the choices.
Okay.
So what are my beliefs about emotions? What are my beliefs about my emotions? I mean, you started by saying some of us just want to get rid of them, like they just get me in trouble. But what are the beliefs about that? Then am I aware with what mine are, what the emotions are I am experiencing, and then what are the choices that I have to make based on the emotions that I see. And so sometimes it is dignifying them. I am feeling really afraid, or I'm feeling an overwhelm of grief. Well, if you've had a loss, or if you're getting ready to do something really challenging, those emotions make a lot of sense. And and I think what you're wanting to help us get at a bit is when those emotions become, to some degree out of hand.
Destructive, yeah.
And so they're destructive of ourselves, or they're destructive of other. I should have put on my glasses to see all of these. But when they're becoming so big, are we able to be in touch with? I've got a lot of anger in me right now, and even though this situation is challenging, I need to make a choice to step it back so I can engage in a rational way. I mean, another term that we use is when you're triggered. So an emotional trigger, or a person in a triggered space, is you're not in a rational space. Mm-hmm. And so you're feeling a lot of feelings related to what just happened. Maybe it's something that has happened multiple times, or it connects to something else in your life. So the emotion is really big related to all of that. And in order to have a productive conversation with someone, we're not trying to get you not hurt or not angry. We are trying to get you in a window of tolerance where your brain is online to have a productive engagement.
It seems to me that different individuals also have biases of emotions, almost habitual emotions, and if it seems to me that often those come out of belief systems, perhaps belief systems that the world's a dangerous place, or that the world's out to get them, to where they are operating emotionally almost with the image that I've used at times as if they had a lens on that is coloring everything red, or
Right.
is coloring everything blue, or fearful yellow. And the emotions are what they are, but they have become something habitual that is perhaps speaking to a truth or an untruth that they believe about the world, about themselves, or about God.
And are you thinking in those circumstances, people that actually don't see it as a problem, they feel justified?
I
Or are you, they're actually struggling?
I think that as I've seen some of those people, it's not that they don't see it as a problem. They fundamentally see it as truth.
Right.
So they look at a situation and say, well, I should be worried about this.
Right.
But the problem is they look at every situation and say, I am warranted to feel worried about this.
Yes.
So all I am doing in reality is acknowledging the truth
Yes.
of this situation, which is really worrisome. Right. But in reality, every situation is worrisome. And so the reason they don't push back against that is because at the core, they believe that feeling is expressing a objective truth, as opposed to a belief system.
Right. Well, would you say that that also exposes a belief system about God in those moments of, and we all have this, we live in I trust God and I walk out this door and I worry about something as if God is not in control of it at all.
Absolutely, yeah.
But those are places that are good to be exposed as well, to invite me back into a dependence on God. That, yes, the world is a painful, scary place. That is true. It's the world we live in. But we also live with a God that is caring for us and in control.
Well, it's one of the places that I so deeply believe in, kind of the concept that's in Hebrews of renewing our mind, of reading the Bible regularly so that we allow its truth to shape us, and perhaps its truth to reshape feelings that I have or wrong belief systems, which then show themselves in feelings. So if I kind of need that objective truth, and to come back to time and time again to expose, to shine a light on untruths that I'm convinced are true. Getting kind of really broad, but it's to me, it's those habitual negativities or fears or shame or worries or anxieties that we believe are representing a truth, and often can thereby become completely disruptive to wellness.
Yeah, I think the best way I know how to speak to that is to look at our lives in this interplay between what am I believing and what am I choosing. And so if I'm in a place of worry and anxiety, what is the next productive choice I have to make about that state of mind? And so is it going to a scripture? Is it
Going to the gym.
Going to the gym, right?
Yeah.
Or telling a friend. A lot of my passion is the power of the way that we can have conversations with one another, and the way that we can be a healing agent to one another. And I was with a friend that I meet with weekly this week, and I was telling her about a place that I so frustrated that I often feel anxious. And it was very helpful for her to ask me just a simple question: what do you think about that experience makes you anxious? I mean, it was not a profound question, but what I said was, well, I fear feeling embarrassed, I feel getting some exposure of shame. And as soon as I said that, I went back to that same setting last week, and I didn't feel as anxious.
So great.
Because it was just helpful to name it.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think that naming things is just one of the most powerful tools that we have. A little while back, I haven't been doing it recently, but because I want to be an emotionally real person, and I know perhaps I'm a little bit wired to hold emotions in a very controlling type of way. In the morning, I would begin my journaling with the question, what am I feeling? There was a great intent behind that. But as I expressed earlier, because I only had about 5 or 6 words to use with that, and I was really only focusing on the negative things that I was feeling, I found that the practice kind of faded away because I wasn't doing a good job of naming the breadth and the positivity of feelings, as well as the nuance of some of the negative feelings. And what you described, like your friend, is, I think, perfect with that.
Yes.
So, so that's great. I love the thought of the truth is that we're all going to feel. Then there's this second piece of different people are going to express what they're feeling in different ways. They're going to shut it down. They're going to spend it all out in all of its vigor. They're going to control it. People are going to express it in different ways. And then some people may choose from that expression to then make particular choices. Is that a way of saying it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So if we're trying to kind of pull this together, when I was thinking of this episode, I was thinking, I love your window of tolerance, and another way of kind of thinking about the window of tolerance is a pendulum. A pendulum that has a wide range up to the left and a wide range out to the right, and then, a place in the center. And at least in this analogy, I'm thinking of that place in the center as a healthy place. So if we think about that way, what would your recommendation be for a person that perhaps is controlled or dominated or is in this rut of habitually negative emotion, who even they themselves might say, I'm just a really emotional person. I'm a feeler, and that is what I relish about myself. I like that about myself. But there's also these nagging, regular, negative, destructive things that come because there's this hyper emotionality. What would you suggest to help that person move to a little bit healthier place?
Well, I don't know if this hits it exactly, but I heard a quote one time of if you're someone that sort of goes out in the day and all you see are the positives, shame on you, because it is a broken and sad world out there.
Right.
If you're someone that goes out in the world and all you feel and experience is the negative, shame on you. There's a beautiful world with a lot of goodness, and you're missing out on that. And I appreciated that because I think it is the invitation for us to hold the complexity. And so if you find yourself on one end of the other, that you're asking yourself, what is it in my life today that is goodness? What do I have? If you look at a feelings wheel, what is it that I have to be happy about today? Maybe even asking yourself where you see each of those things in your life, or a few of them. What do I have to be happy about? What do I have to be sad about? What does make me angry? uh, can I name the breadth of emotions as I look at my life? Can I see those things? Because usually, you're right, there's certain ones that some people like anger, honestly, and a lot of us in Christian worlds, like anger's just bad. Like, shut that one down.
Right.
And there are things to be angry about in the world. But we want to express that in a healthy way and not cause more harm. And if you're someone that is just stuck right now in a sad, depressed state, and maybe because of things you're looking at in the world or in your life, then I would challenge you to build a habit, maybe building a habit similar to yours, but like asking yourself, what is it that I have to be happy about today? As well as, what is it that is hard in the world? But so it's making choices to build some muscles and not just say, I don't think we can say this is just how God made me. I don't think I can say that about any area of my life because there's so much that just needs to be redeemed. And there's a lot of growth. And so to be open to ask yourself, what in the way of, if God made me emotional, how does he want to grow me?
Yeah, so that's really great. I mean, that's a two-pronged, powerful takeaway to say, am I balancing my emotionality with all of the positive emotions that are available in this world? Am I balancing that? And then what I hear you say is am I also expressing the more difficult emotions in a acceptable or in a positive way that can, if I'm angry, am I doing something good with that anger?
Yes.
Or am I doing something terrible with that anger? The anger is fine.
Yes.
What am I doing with it? So that it's paying attention and naming how you are expressing that.
Yeah.
And then also balancing it on the other side.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, I haven't really thought to express it quite like that. But I think all of us can grow in naming what we're feeling and then naming, what am I doing with that? What are the choices that I'm making?
Yeah.
And are there any different choices I would like to be making?
Yes. And it's a great place to bring a friend into the discussion.
Yes.
To say, what am I doing with this? Or what do you see you doing with this?
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. All right, so let me flip to the other side of the pendulum, and then I think we've given everybody a headache. Turns of things to think about. What about the person, and we all know this, and this is where I probably edge a little bit more, hopefully not too dramatically, to this side of the spectrum. Someone who is, let me say it in an extreme way, shut down emotionally. Mm-hmm. They would perhaps even say they don't feel emotions. They don't feel these things. And you're challenging that, I think, correctly, but they are perhaps very controlled and beginning with a belief system that suggests that these emotions aren't serving any particularly good purpose. In a sense, at least as I've read a lot about Stoicism, it perhaps hints that direction. How could that person move to a healthier place on this pendulum?
Two things come to mind. One is, are they willing to sit and be open to the belief that maybe there's more emotion in them than they're in touch with? And just sort of, we've talked about just making space for that. And also, is there anything that feels really scary to feel that might be contributing to staying away from a lot of emotion?
Yes.
Because sometimes it's actually been a chosen strategy for a particular reason. If there's been something anywhere in someone's life that might have had a lot of emotion to it, that we we just shut that down. Like, that's just too much. I don't know how to process that in life. So I'm going to choose to live over here. And so that's where I think we have to have compassion with each other for what we see, whether it's a lot of emotion or not as much expressed. That often there's a story behind, whether it was our family of origin or maybe our own life, that it was something that was so hard that we've dealt with it the way we knew how, but we've put it in a box over there.
All right, so I'm going to be a little far vulnerable here to an experience that still stands out very vividly for me. There are probably multiple ones on this stage here, but I remember when I was in high school and I played lacrosse, and I was a lacrosse goalie, and one of the things that happens with lacrosse goalies is you get hit with the ball a lot, and it's really, really painful. Something about one particular day, I happened to get hit with the ball a lot, and something broke in me. And I became kind of filled with rage. It wasn't really so much about getting hit with the lacrosse ball, but something happened, and I just felt like I completely lost control of how I was feeling at that time. That was an absolutely awful feeling. It scared me. It was something that I went, I don't want that to ever happen again. I didn't take it out on anybody. I didn't express it in a bad way, but what I felt inside is horrible. And I think there was a piece of that then caused me from that point forward to say emotions in their extreme are dangerous. So I need to manage my emotions. And I think that's probably brought me a little bit to, it's a belief system, brought me a little bit to who I am. And so I think you're right. So many people for whom the pendulum is up there, underneath the whole thing, feel like that to allow emotions to come to the surface is a tremendous risk and scary, because they don't know what would happen if they did. And so I acknowledge that's part of the reason that I think this is...
You felt dangerous in that moment.
I felt dangerous. Not that I was going to do anything to anybody, but I just didn't mind what that felt like, and I thought this is not good. So
when we make a vow, that's like a vow. When we make something like that, it really has the power to just shut it down. Like, I will never experience that again.
Yes.
And so, Dave, thank you for letting us know that.
And you know, I think what you expressed so well is that vow, as reasonable as it might have been at the time relative to how I was feeling, there is a cost to that vow, because that vow also, I think, eliminates the other sides of feelings, that feeling of overwhelming joy and love for people, of excitement. So, you know, there's even in all of this, there's so much help for me to experience and grow with this, I'm sure, for all of us. I don't know, this is, I think, a powerful conversation. And I would hope for those who are listening that each one of us would maybe take the risk of creating some space to process what we've talked about on an individual basis of, you know what, this is a place for me to grow in wellness and grow in positive direction. We need to for our own sake. We need to for our family's sake.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity, and I'm gonna keep this chart close by because this is just powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tommy. It's been a privilege to talk about it and hear more of your story. And I think if, like you say, if we're all willing to take a pause and to look at some of these things, I think it'll impact all of our relationships. We'll just operate in a healthier, fuller way.
I go so far to saying this is what I felt at the beginning, that this conversation process has the opportunity to change our lives for good, to utterly change our lives for good. It's that big a deal, which is, I'm sure, why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, for everybody listening, hopefully, please share this episode. I just think this is so important for you, for me, for all of us, for our families, for our wellness, for our relationship with God, to think, to name what we believe, to name these emotions, and to move to a place of health, which is not a place of overexpression or repression, but a place of health related to our emotions. So thanks so much for listening, everyone. Please do share this. I hope this is an episode that will do great good in many people's lives. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks, Tom.
Be back next week.